Welcome to the Blind Zone, where curiosity brings its own reward. And what am I curious about today? I'm curious that I forgot 3 additional components to preparedness. So I'm going to explore those today. I'll go over what I said the previous 6 were, and then I'll tell you about the next 3, but only 2 of which I'm going to cover today. So the 6 ones in a previous episode that I told you were: 1, the awareness to need to be prepared. The second, spiritual preparedness. The third one, practical preparedness. The fourth one, physical preparedness. The fifth one, emotional preparedness, which we have not covered yet. The sixth one, practicing preparedness. And then the next 3 are communications, community, and safety. So we're going to cover the next 2 today. And I have to tell you, these last 3, the communications and the community and the safety, I don't have a lot of good answers for, and I think that's why I forgot them. But they don't make them any less important. They just mean I don't have a lot to offer. So let's talk about communications first, because what you want to do is be able to stay in touch with everybody. And we're so used to having our cell phones that we automatically think that they're always going to be there. And that's not realistic. Let's just put it that way. So if your cell phone went down, how else could you communicate? So according to other preppers, there was a couple different options. One was a ham radio, which we have to have a tower and a license for. And since my HOA won't even let me grow tomatoes, I doubt they're going to let me put up a 60-foot ham radio tower. So that was off the table for me. It might work for other people, but it's not going to work for me. The other one I thought of was a CB radio, but again, that requires electricity. And so that doesn't seem like a very viable option. The third one was a satellite phone, which I looked into, and they are very expensive. Now you can buy them for an as-needs basis, but you rent them, and they're still very expensive. And what if the satellites get knocked out? Then you're still dead in the water without communications. I thought of smoke signals, but that's not as practical as you might think. And then I also thought of like walkie-talkies. Well, a lot of the walkie-talkies are in sight range, so you have to be in sight of somebody. So if you lived on maybe an acre property and it was flat, you could probably get away with walkie-talkies. They ran on batteries, and they're very practical. Now, there was one called Rapid Radio, and it was a walkie-talkie system, and it went all over the country, but they used cell towers. Well, if the cell towers were up, I would just use that. The only other alternative that I could come up with was going back to old school and getting a landline. But you would have to make sure that the people in your contact group also had landlines, because they would be more likely to still remain viable if all things went sideways. So I tried to check into it with my carrier, because I know my house was, there's a dedicated line for that. So I could probably do that, but I would have to check if my son's house had a dedicated line that we could tap into. But again, what that also means is that I would have to be tethered to my home to find anybody, to find, people. So this is where having a plan really will come into place. So you want to know where people are, where they're going, what to expect, have a plan A, B, and C, what to do in case of this, and this. Now, in this communications part, I was telling you how we can communicate with others, but it's really important that you have a radio, a battery-operated radio, with an AM, an FM, and a weather band channel. Now, while you can't communicate out, it's just as important for you to find out what is really happening on the outside world. So communication, being able to receive information and have a way to communicate with others, is going to be a very important part of this whole process. Now, I did buy a AM/FM radio with a weather station, and also had a small thing that I could recharge a variety of objects, because it said it was solar powered. I don't really trust that feature very well, but again, The radio itself was inexpensive, so I did purchase it. If I find out any other information, I'll come back around to that, but that's the best I offer on communications. The next was community. Now, in most of these preppers, they have acres and acres and acres of fortifiable land that they could protect. I don't live in that community. I live in a small condominium community. It's not even gated. I don't even know my neighbors. I know maybe a handful of them. But in the prepper world, what they're suggesting with community is that you get like-minded people together, you know what to do, and everybody has a job. So there was like this one man, he got people in his area that were like-minded. So he had a doctor, a nurse, an engineer, a carpenter. He picked out skill sets that were going to help his group if they had to reformulate a small community. And that's a great idea. But again, I don't know my neighbors that well. And if you have people that are like-minded and are all working towards the same purpose, you will stand a much, much better chance of getting on the other side of this in fairly decent shape. So that's it. I don't know what my plans are with community. I know that I have some friends that we've all talked about the what if scenarios and the plan A, plan B, plan C. And that's all I can keep telling you is plan, 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 plan. Plan for as many contingencies as you can think of. And last one is safety, and that's going to be number 9. And I'm sure when I think about this later, there'll be probably a 10, 11, and a 12. But for 7, 8, and 9, I don't have real good solutions, and 9 is safety. And they're talking just being able to protect your property in a couple of ways that they do it. And again, I'll talk about that more at length in the future because I still have a couple more to do. I want to tell you about my solar oven and the safety feature. So at this point, I've talked through 1 through 8, and I just pray that when you see these videos that you take it serious, that you are aware of the necessity to be prepared. And I'll say that I approached my HOA with this and they weren't very interested in it. So I know that as far as community goes, I'm probably going to be odd man out here. And so I'm going to have to resolve that a different way. So this is another cheery topic. And I just thank you again. And we'll see you next week on the Blind Zone.